Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to Behind the Mission, our monthly series here where we talk about what it takes and what it's like to work in international development and at the World Bank Group. I'm your host, Srimati Sridhar, and it's my pleasure to be guiding you through today's conversation on disability and inclusion at the World Bank Group. December 3rd is the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And ahead of that, we're going to be speaking with two colleagues, Charlotte McLean-Talapo, our Global Disability Advisor at the World Bank Group, and Carol Mejavon, who is the Sector Leader for Sustainable Development for the Maghreb countries, based in Morocco. Both are professional women with disabilities who have flourished in their careers here at the Bank Group, and they're here to share with us their experiences and to answer your questions as it relates to disability and inclusion at our organization. For today's episode, we do have with us an American Sign Language interpreter who will be pinned on the corner of your screen. Now, before we get started, I do want to encourage those of you that are tuning in online to share your questions in the comments section. And you can always follow along online using the hashtag BehindTheMissionWBG. We look forward to hearing from you. With that, let's get our conversation started. Charlotte, Carol, I'm really looking forward to talking to you both about what the World Bank Group is doing around disability and inclusion. And in an effort to be as accessible as possible, would you give us also a descriptive introduction of yourself before we dive in? I'll just briefly start by saying that I'm Shri. I'm the moderator of the program, and I'm a South Asian woman with brown skin, long black hair, black eyes, and today I'm wearing a pink blouse with a red blazer. So Charlotte, let me now turn it over to you for your introduction, but to also answer the first question of the program, which is to know a bit more about what you do. You are the Global Disability Advisor for the World Bank Group. So for people that aren't familiar with that title, tell us more about what your job entails. Wait to start over. Hi, everyone. We're so sorry for that interruption, but we're back here to just kind of rewind a little bit. I was saying that Charlotte, Carol, I'm really looking forward to talking to you both about what the World Bank Group is doing around disability and inclusion. And in an effort to be as accessible as possible, could you start off by giving a descriptive introduction of yourself before we dive in? I'll just briefly start by saying that I'm Shri. I'm the moderator of the program, and I'm a South Asian woman with brown skin, long black hair, black eyes, and today I'm wearing a pink blouse with a red blazer. So, Charlotte, let me now turn it over to you for your introduction, but to also give an answer to the first question, which is getting to know you a bit better. You are the Global Disability Advisor for the World Bank Group. So for those that aren't familiar with that title, tell us more about what your job entails.
Thank you, Shri. My name is Charlotte McLennan Tlapo. I'm a brown woman with long brown hair and green eyes. Today I'm wearing black framed reading glasses, and I have on a red and pink polo neck, and I'm wearing large gold hoop earrings. I also have a set of headphones on my head. I have to say, it's always wonderful to be able to share a platform with Carol. But now to your question.
Sorry, Charlotte, keep going.
But now to your question. In my role as disability advisor, I lead on providing the institution with 3 key building blocks to advance disability inclusion. These 3 building blocks support the operations, and they support building the analytical base and fostering partnerships. On the first block of operations and advisory services, I provide technical advice across the institution on various aspects of disability inclusion, which might include working with project teams to ensure that our operations are more disability inclusive, or it may entail providing technical inputs into strategic documents. It may also include developing policy and guidance with sector specialists on a range of disability issues and sectors. For example, it might be focusing on disability measurement or on inclusive healthcare systems or on inclusive education or inclusive digital development. So really looking at the sectors and making sure that they are addressing issues around disability inclusion. This guidance is really important because it assists us in coalescing around a common understanding of what we mean when we say we are disability inclusive. Now, this guidance is often used with the various instruments that the bank has to support our clients. So that's kind of under the, the package of support to operations. On the second, and what I see as a foundational block, is building of the analytical base. And in this regard, my role is to lead on new knowledge on disability inclusion, to review ongoing knowledge products and analytics, again, across the institution, to ensure that disability inclusion is embedded and addressed. Another part of my job is managing resources to support disability inclusion. And currently I manage 2 trust funds that support disability inclusive education, and we work across 9 countries in low-income economies. And last but not least is the third block. And this block is the block that focuses on building strategic partnerships. We recognize that we do not have all the capacity and certainly not all the knowledge on disability inclusive development. And therefore, it is essential for us to have strong partners that do this work and that we can work with. So it is also essential that we partner with and listen to organizations of persons with disabilities, because they have the lived experience, they understand the country context, and often they have the solutions. So Shri, in one sentence, I would say that my work is very much about finding entry points to build the disability inclusive agenda and to ensure that it becomes a cornerstone of the larger development agenda.
And a very important agenda that we have here. Thanks so much for being here with us, Charlotte. And Carol, let me now turn over to you for your introduction, but also question and getting to know you a bit more. You've worked in the field for several years and in many different developing countries. How has the experience been for you so far? And has it been easier in certain countries than others to conduct your work?
Thanks a lot, Shri, and nice to be with Charlotte and everybody. So my name is Carole Mégevin, and let me describe myself first. So I'm a white woman, blonde, curly hair, with glasses. Today I wear a blue shirt with white and red stripes. That you can't see, but I'm in a wheelchair, and I had an accident when I was 21. So yes, I had the privilege to be able to work in different countries over the past 20 years with the World Bank, starting with a position at the World Bank country office in Cameroon, in Yaoundé, for 5 years. And then I moved to the headquarters in Washington for about 9 years before going to Argentina, Buenos Aires. And now I'm based in Rabat, Morocco. So clearly, what you were mentioning is very true. I could witness firsthand that the situation is very, very different. And despite the fact that my disability has not changed at all over the past 20 years, I could see how different my experience in a wheelchair has been in these different countries. And I got to realize how much my disability is not so much about my physical constraints, but how they do interact with my environment. And when I say environment, it's about the infrastructure environment, because as you can imagine, it's important for me to have the ramp that will allow me to enter a building. It's important to be able to go to the bathroom, and all this infrastructure setup that I need to use to make sure that I can move and I can do my work as I need to. But I think it's important also, and I could see that to mention that there are cultural differences when it comes to the perception to disability. And these are important because it will also very much impact and interact in the way that you will be engaging with the different people in the country. Just let me give you an example. I was based for 4 years in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And just when I arrived, there was a new administration. The vice president, a woman, was in a wheelchair. The minister of labor was in a wheelchair. And I can tell you it was easy to access any public buildings because they were aware, those public figures had already made a huge progress in this need for infrastructure that would be disability friendly, but also in terms of awareness raising that people with disability can and show that they can access the highest rank in the public sector, but also in the private sector. Arriving in Morocco was a different story. So you barely see disabled people in the street. It's very difficult to have any accessible infrastructure, because I think the idea in Morocco is that the disability will be managed at the family level, and that it hasn't been perceived as a society issue. And when it comes to decision making in terms of infrastructure, sometimes this dimension is overlooked. So what I would say is that very different situation, very different context that requires me to adjust and to be flexible and to make sure that in whatever condition I need to be able to find a way to do my job. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. I mean, you raised a lot of important points here. So let's follow up on this a bit further. How has the World Bank Group supported you so that your disability hasn't come off as an obstacle to your work?
Well, I haven't worked in many other institutions, but what I can say is that working at the bank is certainly a privilege when you have a disability first, because there will be a lot of attention to make sure that everything you need physically will be there to help you. And Charlotte was mentioning the funds that she is managing to making sure that people in needs will be able to receive the support that they need. What I would say is that I also have the privilege to work with a lot of colleagues that are willing to support. And that's part of the mindset. And people will make sure that whenever you need it, when you are in a mission, in a field visit, things will be adjusted and accommodated so that you can really deliver on the task and your job. But maybe I will look at another dimension. So not only what the World Bank can help me do, but also what I can support the World Bank in its mandate and its values. And I think that's really important. And I think that's something that I got to realize a little late in my career at the bank. I do think that even though my work has nothing to do with disability, being in a wheelchair, participating in meetings with high-level governments, but also with project beneficiaries, that has an impact in terms of making, the agenda on inclusion really move forward. And just being there and showing that even though you're in a wheelchair, you can do the job. I do think that it has a lot of impact and it really matters. And it's really in line with the values of the World Bank. Thanks.
And certainly sends a powerful message, right, Carol? Charlotte, as a Global Disability Advisor, you've seen the institution grow. So would you say that there has been progress in moving the needle towards having a more inclusive institution?
Thanks, Cherie. That's a great question. Yes, I have indeed seen the institution grow in relation to disability inclusion, both in terms of being a staff member with a disability. So like Carol, I use a wheelchair, but also in terms of our external facing work, which I just described earlier on in terms of what my focus is. When I joined the bank in 2004, there was a disability working group, which was the place that issues around disability were discussed. Today, we have an extremely active disability advocacy and resource employees group called DARE. We have a staff association working group on disability. We have the Disability Accommodations Fund to support staff with disabilities to ensure that their reasonable accommodations are met. And we have policies in place to support staff with disabilities. So quite a bit has happened in regard to what we do internally. In our outward facing work, we definitely have a much larger cohort of bank staff who are working on disability across the sectors and the regions. We now have focal points in most of the sectors and in all regions. And we definitely have seen an uptick in the number of projects that are disability inclusive. In addition to this, we have the environmental social framework, which has been a huge boost for advancing disability inclusion. And the framework works along a suite of robust technical guidance notes on different facets of disability inclusion. I think it's important also to just point out that alongside this operational work, through our funding mechanisms like IDA 19 in this case, we have seen very important opportunities to accelerate disability and the bank's work. And if we look at the IDA 19 package, we see that it recognizes disability inclusion as a cross-cutting theme. It embeds disability inclusion in 6 policy commitments, and it commits to investing in disability disaggregated data, which is really important. And I should note that as we think about IDA 20, we're going to maintain our level of ambition, and we're actually proposing for IDA 20 to have a standalone policy commitment on universal access, which again would cut across through a range of sectors, including education, health, social protection, water, and so forth. And so to answer your question in a nanosecond, yes, there has been significant progress on disability inclusion at the World Bank since I joined. I would just end this response by saying, in many ways, we have all the building blocks in place. And now I think what we need to do is to replicate and multiply what works and collectively work towards constructing an inclusive ecosystem that is both accessible, but very importantly, sustainable for all.
Thanks, Charlotte. I can't say it better myself. So guys, if you're just joining us, you're watching Behind the Mission, where today I'm speaking with Charlotte McLean-Dolapo, who's our Global Disability Advisor at the World Bank Group, and Carol Mejavon, who's the Sector Leader for Sustainable Development for the Maghreb countries working out of Morocco. December 3rd is the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and we're talking about the importance of disability and inclusion in the workplace. And we're very happy that Charlotte and Carol have been able to join us to share their experiences. I also want to take a moment to thank you, our online audience, for being with us here today. And we know that you've been busy submitting your questions for Charlotte and Carol, so let's take a minute to go through a couple of those. I've got a question here from Virginie Toko in Cameroon, who is a disability rights advocate and wants to know, how can the World Bank be of help to persons with disabilities in a time of crisis? And how does the institution mainstream disability in their different activities? Who would like to take this question?
I'm happy to respond to Virginia, and thank you very much for your question. So I would say that there are many ways in which the bank can support and assist persons with disabilities. The one way is to ensure that persons with disabilities participate in our stakeholder engagement consultations, that we consult and that we listen to what their needs are. We can also partner with organizations with disabilities at a country level to advance the agenda. And we have some examples of that kind of work. We did so in Malawi on an inclusive education project. We can partner with organizations of persons with disabilities to collect data, as we did recently for a phone-based survey that we used for a research paper on the impact of COVID-19 on children with disabilities. So I think there are a number of different ways that we can work with organizations of persons with disabilities at country level during a crisis. On your second part of the question around mainstreaming, we strive at the bank to mainstream disability inclusion by embedding disability-specific components, and those may be full components in a project, maybe an indicator, and the idea is to embed this into our project design. But I think it's also important to think about how we mainstream disability inclusion in our social analysis and how we ensure that the way we do business is disability inclusive, to ensure that we're mainstreaming disability inclusion in the analytics and the knowledge products that the bank develops. And then finally, I think part of the mainstreaming comes from what Carol said. How do we ensure that we as an institution are accessible to persons with disabilities? That certainly helps in mainstreaming the agenda.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. And one more online question here from Sakir Alam, who wants to know if there is a particular way of applying that can make one's application stand out. So what should one focus on to maximize chances of being selected for a job? Carol, maybe I can throw this one over to you.
Sure, Shri. Thank you. Thank you very much, Saki, for your question. So, well, what I can say is, share my personal experience. As I mentioned, I was recruited at the World Bank to become a forestry specialist to be based in Cameroon. And honestly, I don't think that my disability in any way has been taken into account in the decision for the recruitment. But I was bringing the technical skills, I guess, and the competencies, and make me fulfill, the requirement under the terms of references. And I think that was the most important part of the recruitment process. But that said, I can't say that my recruiters were completely blind to my disability. First of all, I could see that when decision was made for me to be based in the country office in Cameroon, everything was done to make sure that the office would be accessible to me. They were building ramps all over the place so that I could access most of the different offices. So that was clearly a sign that they were caring about making sure that I would be able to do the job the way I needed. But maybe a second part, which I think was also important, is when I was applying, clearly they knew about my disability, and I didn't hide my disability. And without saying anything, I think that just deciding to apply to this position, to move from France to Cameroon, even though I was in a wheelchair, that was a testimony that I was just so willing to be able to be part of the World Bank and to contribute to its values and its mandate. So even that it wasn't mentioned or said, I think that was just a strong testimony of the commitment I had for the development agenda and my contribution I wanted to have as part of the institution. So I would say that build your skills, make sure that you have strong technical skills, competencies, sell that first, but also share your personal experience and show how it fits within an institution like the bank. Thank you.
And that certainly goes a long way. Thank you so much, Carol. And a huge thanks to Virginie and Sakir for sending in your online questions. For those tuning in, continue to send in your questions. We do have colleagues behind the scenes who are working hard to answer any questions that you have. So, in the spirit of sharing advice, Carol, let me come back to you here. For people who have disabilities who want to work not just in international development, but they want to be alongside beneficiaries and they want to be right out there in the field, what would be your advice for them? What should they do?
All right, thank you, Shri, for the question. So that was, to me, the most important. I wanted to be at the World Bank because it would allow me to be really close to the beneficiaries, and I knew that I would be able to be part of projects that were, really the one that I wanted to contribute to. And my expertise, as I was mentioning, was on forestry and rural development. So whenever I wanted to go to the field to see the impact of the project, I had to go to very remote areas. And as you can imagine, it not always very accessible. So that made the mission very challenging, but also at the same time very rewarding. So maybe one advice, and that's what I'm trying to apply to myself all the time, is to make sure that you keep track. You always check on the cost benefit balance. And what I mean is that going for those missions and going to the fields and getting to interact with the beneficiaries can come with costs. Some frustration. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes you end up not even being able to see what you were supposed to go to look at. So that can generate some frustration and some pain sometimes. But the reward and the benefits can be very high. So I always check on myself whether I'm still on the positive side of the equation, if the benefits are still higher than my costs. And honestly, after 20 years, I can say that the positive aggregate is always there. So it's so rewarding to be able to be part of this development adventure and to really see the impact that the World Bank has through its project. So I think you need to be demanding to yourself, to push your limits, but you also need to take care and make sure that whatever you do will be good for you. So just always try to find the right balance that will suit you. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. And Charlotte, to that end, the World Bank Group is decentralizing with the goal of having 55% of its workforce in country offices and not Washington, D.C. by 2025. So Carol has shared here some great insights so far as to what it's like to work outside of HQ, but what message would you send to people with disabilities who are interested in working with us here at the World Bank Group?
So another great question, Shiri. And I would say if you're driven and passionate about development, about people, about the planet, then the bank is an incredible and an extremely gratifying institution to work in. What I would say to someone who's interested in development is that you need to follow your professional interest. And also, you do not have to work exclusively on disability issues because you have a disability. And I think Carol has laid that out and shows that in her work all the time. That's a choice. My sense is that your lived experience as a person with disability often informs your work, whether you're working on disability or you're working in another sector. There are those issues that you bring to the table because of your lived experience. But I also want to amplify the D in diversity, and I would really encourage people with disabilities who qualify to apply to the bank if they are really passionate about development, because this is an institution where we can actually change the lives of many, many people.
Thanks, Charlotte. You and Carol both have so far shared some really great advice, right, on finding the right balance, on being passionate. And, before I let the both of you go, I do have one last question for each of you. And I would love to know what's something that you wish someone had told you about working at the World Bank Group if you have a disability that you think might be helpful to those in similar situations that are looking to apply today. Carol, can I start with you for this one? Oh, I think you're on mute, Carol. If you could just unmute.
Yes, that works now?
That works now.
All right, very good. Now, maybe building on something that I mentioned, so when I started my experience at the World Bank, my main goal was to try to make forget my wheelchair. I wanted people just to ignore I was in a wheelchair. So I would do anything possible to do the same thing as my other colleagues and not ask for any support when it comes to the wheelchair. Because I wanted to prove to myself and to my colleagues that I could deliver at the same level as the other colleagues. And I got to realize a little later that, as Charlotte was mentioning as well, that my contribution was not only on the technical expertise, that I think that with my wheelchair, I was also bringing something different, maybe less tangible, but that had a huge impact in terms of development and awareness raising when it comes to inclusion and the agenda of disability inclusion. So my advice would be just be yourself and be sure that your disability is also a contribution to the mandate of the bank. And while you can strengthen your technical expertise and make sure that this will be highly relevant and highly recognized, also be sure that being with a disability is also a very, very important and subtle contribution to the development agenda that the World Bank is pushing for. So I'm very grateful that now I understand that based on many discussions I had the chance to have with colleagues and bosses. And now I feel that, trying to push these boundaries is also part of my terms of references. And that is part of the contribution I can make in the different countries I have the privilege to work in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol. And Charlotte, what's something you wish someone had told you?
Thanks. So in many ways, I was quite fortunate. I joined the bank to work specifically on disability. And so in many ways, I had the background. I was briefed on what to expect. Once I joined, I was quickly immersed into this space. And I have to say, I learned the ropes from those who came before me. And in many ways, the things that I learned were some of the basic things. For instance, how to access the Disability Accommodation Fund that I mentioned earlier on, how to navigate the DC housing market. As a wheelchair user, getting advice on neighborhoods that were more accessible than others was very, very helpful for me. I would say on tips for applying, like Carol, I would not hide my disability. In my case, I can't hide my disability, but there are disabilities that are invisible. And I think it's important to recognize that, disclosure is a question of choice, and people do not have to feel compelled to disclose their disability. But more importantly, I think what it is that, gives you visibility and shines a light on you is what is your professional contribution that you bring to the institution? What is the experience that you bring to the institution? The knowledge that you can share once you join the institution. And very importantly, your drive for a better world for all that is linked to the twin goals of the institution.
Well, some inspiring messages there coming from two inspiring women, Charlotte, Carol. I want to thank you both so much for joining me here today on Behind the Mission and for sharing your experiences about working with disabilities at the World Bank Group. I hope that folks tuning in really got to learn from your insights and have a better understanding of how the organization promotes inclusion. So thanks so much again for being here. And I want to give a big thanks as well to our American Sign Language interpreter for joining today's episode, and also to you, our online audience, for being here. Remember that Friday, December 3rd is the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and the World Bank will be having an event that will be live streamed that morning. So do head on over to World Bank Live to learn more about how you can join. Now, you can always follow us. We're on social media. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and you can check the latest career openings on our job site. If you came late to today's chat or you want to watch it back, you can do so right here on LinkedIn or over on World Bank Live. That's live.worldbank.org. I'm Srimati Sridhar. Thanks again for joining me here today, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.